Sound check. Good morning, everyone. We are just going to wait until we have quorum to start the joint meeting this morning. So we're still waiting for a quorum of committee members, and then we'll get started. Well, good morning, everyone. I would like to call us to order, please. This is a special joint meeting of the Environment and Climate Change Committee and Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee. This is actually the second meeting that the joint committees have had. I do want to begin our meeting today, and on behalf of Ottawa City Council, I wish to acknowledge that Ottawa is built on the unceded Anishinaabe-Algonquin territory. The peoples of the Anishinaabe-Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. City of Ottawa honors the peoples and land of the Anishinaabe-Algonquin Nation and honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. At this time, I would like to ask our committee coordinator to take a roll call, please.
Councillor Bradley.
Here.
Councillor Brown.
Here.
Councillor Curry. Councillor Durush.
Here.
Councillor Devine.
Here.
Councillor Dudas.
Present.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Councillor Johnson.
Here.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Present.
Councillor Kelly.
Present.
Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor Lowe. Councillor Luloff.
Present.
Councillor Plant.
Hello.
Councillor Skalski.
Here.
Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Vice Chair Hill.
Present.
Vice Chair Carr. Chair Brockington.
Here.
Chair Menard.
Here.
Your quorum, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I do have a note from Councillor Lowe and Councillor Curry that they may attend the meeting. They just have challenges to arrive on time, but hopefully we'll connect with them before the meeting adjourns. So are there any declarations of interest this morning? Seeing no hands, thank you. Confirmation of minutes. The last meeting of the joint committee was on September 19th, 2024. That was some time ago. Those meeting minutes confirmed? Thank you. We have one item of substance on the agenda today. It's regarding the pilot of the Extreme Weather Preparedness Grant Program. Staff are here to present. So at this time, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. Bonjour à tous les membres du comité conjoint. So my name is Nicole Hoover-Bianache. I'm the Director of Climate Change and Resiliency Services. And joining me for today's presentation are Beth Gooding, Director of Public Safety Services, and Sami Raymond, who's a project manager in our Climate Adaptation branch. So as the Chair had mentioned, we're here today to present committee with a recommendation to approve a new pilot grant program geared towards supporting community extreme weather preparedness. So this has been a joint effort between both my team and Beth's team. And as we will share in today's presentation, and as you would have seen in the report, this program is designed to help communities prepare before emergencies happen by strengthening local capacity. Next slide, please. So the proposed program directly delivers on Council's direction to strengthen community-level preparedness for extreme weather. It supports the Term of Council strategic objective of strengthening community capacity for climate preparedness and emergency response. It also aligns with the strategic goal of community-level preparedness in the 2024 to 2027 Emergency Management Program Strategic Plan. And lastly, it was also a priority action I identified within Climate Ready Ottawa, the city's climate resiliency strategy, which was approved by Council last November. Next slide, please. So in terms of the report recommendations, we are seeking council approval of the pilot program. We are seeking council's approval to delegate authority to the General Manager of Emergency and Protective Services to implement and administer the pilot program, and to direct staff to report back to committee and council within 3 years on pilot findings and recommendations for next steps. I'll now hand things over to both Beth and Sami.
Thank you. So I'll be presenting the next 2 slides, and I'll be explaining how the grant was conceived and why it matters. Juste avant de commencer, je dois avouer que ce sujet me passionne beaucoup. Donc, c'est vraiment un grand plaisir d'être parmi vous et d'avoir l'opportunité de partager mon point de vue. So next slide. So Ottawa's prone to severe weather. Over the past 10 years, we've experienced riverine flooding, flash flooding, drought, derecho windstorm, various tornadoes, extreme heat, extreme cold, ice storms, and severe winter weather. And what we know as well is that the negative impacts of severe weather are not felt equally. People who are already struggling due to age, disability, income, social isolation, or other challenges are always hit the hardest. And I know that members of council are very empathetic about that because I've had multiple discussions with you over the years, and it's the number one question you always ask is, how can we better find and reach people who need our support the most? And that really is the crux of this grant, is that we are aiming to increase the breadth and efficacy of community groups who are already supporting people in need. The city will always be there to help, but we'd like as many groups as possible to chip in after an emergency. Next slide. So one of the challenges of working in the field of emergency management is that some of our most important work is done when nothing is wrong. And so that's the challenge, right, of investing in readiness and preparedness. But we know it works. Studies across North America and globally have shown that communities that know each other, trust each other, and work together always recover faster after an emergency. And I've seen it myself in Ottawa over and over again. During the 2022 derecho windstorm, we saw community organizations open their doors for people who needed a place to go. We've seen community associations organize their own wellness visits to find and support neighbors in need. And a couple of months ago, I was at the main sandbagging station in West Carleton on Len Purcell Drive. And I remember a man drove up, and we thought at first that he needed help getting sandbags, but he didn't. What he wanted to know was which houses in the community were building sandbag walls so that he could go and lend a hand. And to me, that's the definition of community resilience. Ordinary people, community groups pitching in, helping their neighbors during emergencies. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm very passionate about this topic. I could speak forever, but I want to make sure we continue with the presentation. I'm going to hand things over to Sami to continue on, but I do hope I've painted a bit of a picture of the why.
Thank you. Good morning, chairs and committee members. This slide next slide, please. Thank you. This slide provides an overview of the proposed pilot program. The goal of the program is to enhance community resiliency to extreme weather. We'll support local community organizations helping residents to better prepare for extreme weather emergencies. We'll provide funding to support community emergency planning and the acquisition of essential equipment and supplies. Staff worked with grants and contribution team to ensure we satisfy city policies and procedures. The Office of Emergency Management will administer the pilot program with support from Climate Change and Resiliency Services as required. Next slide, please. Staff are proposing that the program be eligible to local nonprofit community organizations that demonstrate governance and accountability practices and deliver projects and services to Ottawa residents. We encourage applications from organizations serving equity deserving and priority populations. Only one application per organization will be accepted each year, with a maximum grant of up to $50,000 per year. Projects are completed within 1 year of receiving funds.
Applicants must demonstrate sufficient liability and property insurance depending on the project and associated risks. Staff worked with legal and insurance services to ensure our program requirements align with city practices. Staff are proposing to launch and promote the program before the end of the year. Next slide, please. Eligible projects are grouped into 3 categories to support practical, on-the-ground preparedness. Proposed eligible equipment balances safety while optimizing funds for greatest community benefit. Further, the proposed project types are designed to support community organizations at different stages of emergency preparedness. Some organizations may be early in their preparedness work and would benefit from support to bring community members together, build awareness, and develop community emergency plan. Other groups may already have established plans and instead focus on funding for equipment and supplies, training on safe use of equipment, or wish to test and practice their plans through exercises. To help illustrate a potential outcome scenario of the proposed program, here's an example. In a prolonged power outage, a community with an emergency plan, trained volunteers, and access to backup power can coordinate support, check on vulnerable residents, and provide local assistance before emergency services can reach everyone. Next slide, please. So my last slide provides an overview of the steps we took to develop the program. The proposed pilot program was informed by an online engagement survey, an environmental scan of comparable municipal and provincial programs, as well as a review of other current City of Ottawa grants and contribution programs. The scan of other comparable programs confirmed that Ottawa's pilot program is an innovative approach that is not widely used in other North American municipalities. Most municipalities deliver preparedness education and training rather than offering direct grants to community organizations. Engage Ottawa survey respondents expressed strong support for the program and the proposed project types. Survey responses confirmed a community gap. Fewer than 1/3 of respondents reported having a community emergency plan. Respondents also identified training, planning, coordination, public education, and maintaining communications and power during outages as priorities. The proposed program was developed to respond to these gaps. So I'll pass it over to Nicole to close the presentation.
Great, merci Sami and Beth. And as Beth and Sami had both spoken to, extreme weather events are becoming, and they're certainly also more or predicted to continue to be more frequent and severe. So making community resilience and building that capacity within the community more important than ever. So this grant program is intended to help communities better prepare for emergencies, for when they happen, and position them to better support neighbors throughout extended emergencies. Empowering residents, our neighborhoods and community organizations before emergencies, as Beth had touched on, helps protect health and safety, strengthens that local response capacity, and supports faster recovery during extreme weather events. So what staff are proposing today is intended to be a practical, community-focused initiative that helps advance council priorities and the city's key strategies, including the Emergency Management Strategic Plan, as well as Climate Ready Ottawa. So thank you very much for your time today, and we'll hand things back to the chair.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation as well. The pilot certainly looks interesting, and there are a number of hands already raised. So we'll start with Councillor Kelly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, yes. I'm so eager to get to questions. You're right. So colleagues, we do have one delegation this morning. We have not received any written submissions to date from the public on this matter. So we will hear our delegate first, and following the delegation, then we'll get to questions. So you can keep your hands up. I'll ask if anyone has questions for our delegate. So Ms. Keller-Herzog, please come forward to the delegation section. Good morning to you. As you know, you have up to 5 minutes. At the 1 minute mark, I'll remind you have 1 minute left.
Okay, good morning. As always, it's a pleasure to be here. I see my PowerPoint is up, and I hope that's been circulated. It's a pleasure to be here at this joint committee and have the collaboration between the departments. That's absolutely critical. Next slide, please. I think most of you know cafes, so I'll go on. Next slide, please. So the cafe's position on this is that we strongly support this program and are very pleased to see it and urge you to recommend to council to approve it. This pilot invests in what matters a lot, and that's the base, the community that will be hit by these emergencies. And also the pilot approach is smart policy design. We can test, learn, and adapt, and we urge you actually when administering the program to have an annual cycle of adaptation and learning. Next slide, please. So that's the presentation overview. I'll get right into it. Next slide, please. I think that we all understand the context of increasing hits from intense and extreme weather. And these events place increasing pressure on residents, community supports, and emergency support systems, especially when the extreme weather is combined with the power outages. Next slide, please. As the staff presentation pointed out, fewer than 1/3 of organizations surveyed at the grassroots level, at community level, have a community emergency plan. And that's serious, a serious gap. Next slide, please. So in terms of what are some possible concerns with the proposed program and put forward in a very constructive intent, in terms of the coordination, we find that there is an artificial separation between the city-owned facility emergency preparedness for the community centers and the community organization preparedness. We see there's and we think that the community center should be the hub of resilience for the community organization. So if there's equipment, maybe it should be stored at the community center and not at Joe's house. So we see there's 3 distinct roles that need clear definition. One is the community center-based preparedness to the community organization preparedness. And then there's also the counselor's role during emergencies. And the report is also quite silent on that. So that also bears some thinking, although of course, counselors would not be receiving grants for that. Next slide, please. So the issue of power outage comes up throughout, and we feel there should be a structural point of contact at Hydro Ottawa and Hydro One, so that as communities are coming up with proposals, they have a place to become informed what are the emergency protocols at their utility company. And that would, I think, save some confusion. Next slide, please. We've talked a lot, I think, this term of council about rural realities and that one size doesn't fit all. So we would like to see a little bit more how the grant call and assessment criteria could address rurally based proposals a bit in a more tailored way. Next slide. And lastly, in terms of the administration, we read the documentation carefully, and there was this narrowing of criteria for, in full quotes, professionals. And we feel that like the staff report requires that the service provision and training be conducted by full quote professionals or certified experts, but it doesn't really define what is a professional. So is it someone with 10 years hands-on training, or is it someone with a certification in training from Algonquin College? And that should be made very clear so that people do not get disqualified and waste their time, and that would cause frustration. Last slide, please. So our recommendations then are better, like opening the door for collaboration between community center as hubs and what the community organizations are doing. 2, iterative year-over-year learning from this program. And thirdly, that the program launch should have a structured interface with hydro, explicit accommodation of rural realities, and a clear definition of this professional training and service delivery requirement. Last slide. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much for your delegation. I'll just see if there are any questions from my colleagues. Go ahead, Chair Menard.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Angela, for the presentation. Appreciate
some of the recommendations there and the insights. Oftentimes when emergencies have hit in the last several years, we see community members on the ground. It's kind of ad hoc, but community centers, community associations, individual community members help out. They immediately kind of spring to action. I remember the power being out for 7 days in Old Ottawa South for a period of time. The Dureco had hit, and I remember going to the OCH building there, and all the lights were out. Even the backup power lights were out. But community members went there and they distributed. Somebody came with an EV vehicle to charge people's devices. They gave food out, this sort of thing. The community association also organized some help during that time, and we've seen lots of power outages and storms where they've done that. I guess the reason I'm getting at this is there's kind of an informal thing that happens now. This program, I think, could help formalize that a little bit more, but the informal stuff will still go on. So what's the best way, do you think, given the role that you've got in community associations, what is the best way to interface with existing community associations and our emergency preparedness staff and climate staff to get this everywhere, all over the city, to all community associations, so that they're prepared, regardless of whether they get a grant or not for some machinery or otherwise? What's the best way that they can do that now with the existing context within the city of Ottawa?
Okay, that's a good and fairly broad question. So first of all, I think that readiness means, like, when an opportunity comes your way, like there's like a great new job, and if you are not mentally ready to take that opportunity, then it passes you by. And I would argue that in the same way, if the leaders at the community organization level have that readiness in their mindset, then that is like a really important step. And having this program will actually help, right? Because it incentivizes and people start thinking, hey, we don't actually have anything in our well-organized community association to step up. What if? And it's very natural for all of us to basically hope that the power will not be out during a heat wave or a long freezing spell. And like, we kind of cross our fingers. And I would say most people in this room probably would not be able to survive for, more than 2 days in bitter cold. Like, we would basically plan to go to a hotel. So having that state of readiness, and I think that the community emergency plans at very local level that I've seen, I've been excited to, here's a document, but it tends to really lack definition. So you really need to get people in a particular locality to come together, and then for someone to step up and say, okay, if there's an emergency, I'm going to be ready. I'm going to step up. You can call me. I'm going to have communications ready. Yeah. I know how to contact the counselor. Like, that readiness is critical.
Is that piece is how do you get, what is the best way to ensure that community organizations, community associations specifically, because again, you're on environmental sustainability, but community associations have this information and can do this on a regular basis, so that every year or 2 years, there's training baked in? Is it their own volition? Do they need support? Like, what's actually got to go on to make sure that they're getting the information they need, so that, say, those sessions can happen on a regular basis? I think, because right now I think it feels a little ad hoc, right? So like when there was flooding in Councillor Kelly's ward last term, I remember being out there sandbagging, but it was just an ad hoc thing. The call went out and people went out there. But this is just kind of an ad hoc piece. And so I'm sure the community association was organized in some way, but I'm trying to get at that. We're going to see more and more emergencies. We need to see some coordination, I think, between community groups who are most likely to do this type of work. And I'm wondering if you have any recommendations, doesn't have to be now, maybe in the future, about how best to make sure every single community association, regardless of their insurance, anything else, has some information and training they can share with community, so that way they jump to it, they're doing the right things with our staff. I'll obviously talk to staff about this too, but if you've got advice on that, just given your own role there, I think that's a really important formalization of this piece. So thank Thank you, Chair.
Let me just say one more thing. Like, if we think in terms of like sticks and carrots, so this program is an incentive for people to think about it, but in the middle between, and we're not going to have like a requirement like you community association are legally required to da 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 da. But in the middle, there could also be like proactive outreach. So if each councillor in their ward invites the community leaders in their ward to have a conversation and starts planting the seed about what this could look like, I think that would be very helpful. And then in turn, maybe staff would like to also provide training to councillors about what to talk about and what kind of framing.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I know Councillors Kelly, DeRoche, Skalski, and Dudas, your hands are up for staff. Okay, and Councillor Kavanagh for the delegate. Go ahead. Oh. Councillor Kavanagh?
And she's back.
No.
I just wanted to point out that we did exactly what you were talking about in Bay Ward. And, you know, the unfortunate thing is that people have an experience and get scared because we had floods. We had floods in Bay Ward. And this year looked like it was going to be a flood. So it motivated people. And we did have a session. I want to thank city staff. We had Chris Harsbosch, who was excellent and gave a session. And what we did is we invited community leaders to come to it. So it wasn't an open public meeting. We could do that, but we made it smaller so that we could have the leaders bring it back to their communities. But that's what piques the interest, is the fact that something did happen, unfortunately, because people have realized, you know, that there has been close to an emergency at times, then it, you know, like DeRay showed, that all of a sudden people get motivated. But I think the one thing we discovered is that we need a system to check on vulnerable people. That was the one thing that was asked about, was the checking on vulnerable people, probably all the time, I guess, but during a situation where there's extreme weather, that was important. I don't know if you have any comments about that, but that's what we discovered, that was still something that the communities really have to, you know, get to do themselves. And it's as informal as knowing your neighbor and checking on them. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out, that we did have that and it worked well, and I would recommend it to anyone. Any councillor?
Okay, that's more of a comment than a question.
Yeah,
We'll just leave it there. We'll leave it there. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for your delegation this morning. Okay, now we'll transition to questions for staff. So now I'll recognize Councillor Kelly. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to start by thanking staff for bringing forward this report. I think we can all agree that being prepared for an emergency puts us in a much better place to ensure best outcomes for everyone that is affected. And as the councillor for West Carleton March, I can say that preparedness for extreme weather is not theoretical discussion. Not my ward. Over the past decade, we've experienced repeated flooding, major tornado, derecho. I think we need to standardize the pronunciation of that word. Frequent prolonged power outages, dry wells, and other things that pop up over the years. And unfortunately, we've had plenty of opportunities to learn what disaster relief really means. And an ongoing joke that that happens in my ward is that we're just waiting for the locusts to come, because we seem to have experienced pretty well everything else. But one of the more or most important lessons we've learned, I think, is that community resilience makes all the difference. Local volunteers, community organizations, and neighbors are often the first source of support for residents, long before any official recovery efforts are initiated by the province or the city. In Ward 5, we've seen organizations like West Carleton Disaster Relief and many volunteers step up during these times, and what makes those efforts successful isn't just equipment. I think it's and most importantly, I think it's the relationships and community trust that have been built up long before an emergency occurs, which I think that's why this program is so important, and why I appreciate the approach of this report. So I certainly support the recommendations, and I have a couple of questions for staff. So this one is in regards to the insurance. So the report identifies insurance requirements as a potential barrier to participation for some organizations, but the city already administers community partnership insurance programs to help community groups access affordable insurance. Have staff explored whether that program could help organizations meet the insurance requirements of this grant program, and whether or not there are opportunities to align those two programs?
Hello, Chair, thank you for the question. Staff did initiate discussions with the CPIP team, and while it seems to be a good route, there are some challenges. The direction that's been given for the CPIP is very specific in terms of who the eligible organizations are and the activities that are permitted. So the way this program is moving forward, we're expanding, we're going beyond just community associations or organizations that are placed in a specific geographical area. So we're looking for a broader organizations. And secondly, most of the program or the activities that are permitted in that program are around greening as well as community gardens and now some stewardship. What we're proposing in terms of preparedness activities is beyond the scope of that. So it didn't align.
Okay. So I think also the report appropriately prioritizes organizations that have completed community emergency plans. In West Carleton, we've also seen organizations develop significant preparedness capacity through real-world experience responding to floods, tornadoes. How will the evaluation process recognize demonstrated history and emergency response capability and existing community partnerships in addition to formal emergency plans?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So, Councillor, as you had highlighted within the staff report, certainly we'd be looking as part of that evaluation criteria to certainly also consider kind of that readiness based on the community environmental plans. But as you had recognized too, we know there's a lot of that direct lived experience within the community. So certainly considering those pieces as part of the community as part of the sorry, just give me 1 second.
I think at the time of the application, I think we will be looking at certainly experiences and as well as the feasibility of what they're proposing. And so if they have the experience and they have that skills that they can demonstrate in their application, I think that will be considered.
Thank you. Certainly appreciate the responses from staff, and I know that I will echo what has been said in the presentation, is that preparedness doesn't start when the emergency begins. It starts months and years beforehand through planning and training and communications and most of all partnerships and relationships. So I'm happy to see that this pilot program recognizes the reality and provides communities with tools to strengthen that capacity. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly, and Councillor Deros, you're next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I will support the plan that's on the table today. I think it's important, as many of us unfortunately have seen situations where we need to pull together to respond to an incident and the aftermath of that. I do see, and I know we have a lot to say about the federal and provincial governments at this place. I will say that they've stepped up over the last number of years to enhance the strengthening of community-based emergency preparedness, both at the provincial level and at the federal level. They have grant programs. They have machinery that they're trying to pull together to make sure that communities are ready. And as such, I wonder if staff feel that is there any redundancy between existing programs that are in place with the federal provincial government and the pilot project that you're proposing?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. It's a really important one. So we've assessed the other grant programs that exist, and we don't think we're duplicating in any way. The most important one is the province of Ontario's. They have a community emergency preparedness grant, but most of the organizations that support residents in Ottawa during an emergency are not eligible to apply. And the main reason is because their mandate is not emergency management. Their mandate is food security, or they're a faith-based group, or they provide a social service first and foremost. And so what we'd like to do is recognize the diversity of the groups in Ottawa that step up and help out during an emergencies by providing a grant program to which they would be eligible.
Okay, that's great. And I know you'll do the due diligence and staff will do the due diligence, that there's no stacking, that if they apply to one program and they apply to us, that we're managing that to ensure that there's prudence there in terms of what we're investing in, and we're not stacking, as they call it in contribution lingo.
We will. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As I said, I'll support this. It's an important step forward for really strengthening the safety net and the safety quilt of our city that often involves community groups and neighbors helping neighbors, as well as emergency services. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Skalski and then Dudas.
Thank you, Chair. I just have I want to start by saying that I think this program is really important, and particularly in rural Ottawa, where residents face disproportionate impacts from disasters when they do strike. As someone who was a community association president for a long time, we were particularly seized with emergency preparedness and management. We met with the city staff who came in and talked to us about, and many other community associations across the board. But one thing that sort of struck me quickly right away was how much you do get seized with some of the logistics stuff right away. Where is this going to be stored? How are we actually insured to like if it was me to go into someone's property and use a chainsaw and cut down trees, like, is that something that we're covered for? So I know Councillor Kelly had already asked about the insurance component, but I think we need to actually do some of that work and see how we can support community associations in being properly insured. And as an add-on to what they get now, perhaps under the CPIP program. I do have a couple of questions. Do you think that this program would enable a partnership with the city to enable storage at a community facility? So specifically for things like, I'm thinking generators or, water and supplies and equipment, to not have it be at, as the delegate had described, Joe's shed, but being able to leverage facilities that we have here at the city.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. So, Councillor, we did, as part of the development of the grant program, certainly that was one of the areas that was flagged. Part of the criteria assessment that staff are recommending is that applicants be able to demonstrate proper storage requirements. Certainly through our conversations with our colleagues in facility services, that storage can be quite a premium as it exists, just being able to manage our own service needs within the community centers, but certainly something that would not be off the table for us to look at depending on the nature of the application. So something that we'd be looking at with our colleagues on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, that's helpful. So what I heard there is there's a possibility, but maybe it would have to be arranged in advance and not something that would be enabled through the application process. Is that a fair way to take that?
That is correct, Councillor.
Okay. I read here that there would be restrictions on higher risk equipment, such as vehicles, chainsaws, and so on. I'm just wondering if you can elaborate a bit on the higher risk equipment and on the restrictions themselves, And I'm thinking specifically about chainsaws because that came up a lot in our time because of all the trees that were taken down as something that we would want to have, some additional well-maintained chainsaws ready to help support tree removal.
Thanks for the question, Chair. I think what we're approaching this program with is it's a pilot program. And so we're approaching this that we want to approach it with safety and due diligence and be prudent, but also trying to do it in a way that enables communities as well. So we have decided that projects that or equipment that has higher risk is going to be removed and ineligible during this pilot program. What we will also, though, offer is recommendations for training to how to safely and properly maintain and operate those types of equipment.
Okay, thanks for the clarification there. So it's restricted entirely. It's not just you have to be trained in order to apply. So that's helpful additional information. And one last question, will you be able to accept joint applications? So sometimes we have several communities working closely together, or a community, working in partnership with a church, maybe just leverage their facility. Is that something that you've contemplated and would support?
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely, Councillor. And that will be something that we're encouraging as part of the pilot grant program.
Great. Thanks very much. Yeah, this is a great program. I'm excited to see the details come out here, and I'll certainly be supporting and appreciate your answers to my questions. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. Councillor Dudas and then Kavanaugh. Go ahead.
Thank you. Actually, my colleagues have asked some very pertinent questions, one that I wanted to ask as well. I also wanted to mention that in speaking to some of my community members who are very involved in emergency preparedness, they had mentioned the aspect of storage as being one of the biggest obstacles. And I'm happy to hear that that will be taken into consideration. Some of our community groups are literally just running out of their own homes or are accessing city facilities that don't have, available storage, and to develop partnerships or find alternative places would be beneficial. I also wanted to know how involved will the staff panel be in terms of advising maybe preferred, say, generators or things like that? How much hand-holding will be done? Some groups will be very knowledgeable about what they might need and others may not.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. We believe that most of the groups who are requesting this equipment know exactly what type and model they want, but where there may be some confusion, we're happy to provide some high-level advice.
That kind of segues into my next step, because I see this, we're talking about a pilot. I love that word, and I love the fact that we're going to be testing this out. Over time, my hope is that if we extend this pilot, if it's successful, whether it's grant focused or just more educational component, that we'll see almost all communities across our city in some format, small, large, very active, little bit less active, be involved in emergency preparedness, neighbors watching out for neighbors. So do you see this as part of that natural progression, and that you'll be able to learn from this experience and then maybe use it to establish deeper roots within other communities that might not have as active? They may not have a community association established, but we can work with that.
Mr. Chair, maybe I'll start with that and actually ask my colleagues to dive in a little bit further, but certainly that is the intent, and that is the intent behind setting this up as a pilot, and really allowing us that opportunity to have those conversations and understand from the community where some of those gaps and needs are. And what I'll do is maybe ask my colleague Sami to be able to speak to some of the enhanced communications that we're working on, especially within some of those equity seeker or disproportionately impacted communities where we may not necessarily have those established groups or relationships. We do have some concurrent work that is happening on initiatives that were identified through Climate Ready Ottawa. So maybe Sami, if you'd like to add a little further detail there.
Certainly, thank you. In addition to what we're proposing OEM is also looking to proactively enhance the education and communications with this program. So it's complementary to their existing program, but they're also looking to move that, become more proactive on that front. In terms of equity deserving groups, we are going to be working with OPH as well as CSSD and to promote this program in the priority neighborhoods. And we're also going to be looking for communications that are going to be targeting those disproportionately impacted communities. We already have a program underway where we're reaching out and trying to co-design communications and engagement with equity deserving and disproportionately impacted communities as part of CRO.
And I just wanted to add one more thing, Mr. Chair, because I want to make sure we address the councillor's question. Our vision is for as many individuals, as many groups in Ottawa to be prepared to support their neighbors during an emergency. And part of that is learning through best practices. We already know that there are some very strong community associations who are doing wonderful things already on the emergency preparedness front. And so as part of our engagement, we want to share those stories, inspire other groups, and help them get to the same level.
That's incredibly, I'm very pleased to hear that. I have one such group in my community, the Blackburn Hamlet Community Association, Don Kelly, Brad Hampson. I just want to shout them out because they've been on the forefront of this. What I would say too is that leveraging those stronger groups to help support, educate, and enhance the knowledge of other entities across the city. So it's not always the city who's the provider of support and information. It's them helping each other, which we know they do already. So that would be beneficial. How are you going to gauge success on this pilot? Like at the end of it, and in our delegation, it said, annually, how do you know that this is working and where we go from here?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So there are some sort of output performance indicators that are easy to gauge. So for example, how many community organizations developed a community plan, how many purchased the equipment they sought within the 12-month period that they've been allotted. And then there's some less tangible performance indicators that includes our observations of their level of engagement, their ability to support preparedness activities, including training and exercise, and then during emergencies, their ability to support as many residents as possible. So there's a range of indicators that we're considering right now, and they're a mix of quantitative and qualitative.
This is excellent. I see this as the next step in the evolution of the city's engagement and partnership with our community partners in terms of emergency preparedness. And I only see that this strengthens our ability to adapt to anything. And we will be hit with anything. It's not when, it's if, or it's not if, it's when. But I will say I want to thank staff for all the work. I know that over the years, we've seen that progression from the city's engagement with our community groups, our own, enhancement of our emergency preparedness. And at the end of the day, the more boots on the ground, neighbors watching out for neighbors, that means that our emergency services are freed up to do the heavy lifting and what they need to focus on. So thank you for all the work you've been doing, all the outreach, and Beth in particular. Thank you for working so closely with my communities. I know you've been available anytime they needed you. So thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor Kavanagh and then Devine.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, thank you very much for the work. And as I've already pointed out, we've taken advantage of the services and had a session in our ward, and it was great. I would definitely do it again. I think it needs to be done on a regular basis. These were communities that were somewhat organized, and it's already been mentioned about more disadvantaged areas that don't have leadership. And I wanted to know also about your work with Ottawa Community Housing and the communities there, because those are neighborhoods we can reach through staffing, but I just wanted to know what's being done there.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So Ottawa Community Housing would not be eligible to apply, but we have existing and very close relationships with them on the emergency management front, born partly through previous emergencies, including the 2022 derecho. So we view them as a client to some of the services that these organizations will be providing. For example, one of the faith-based groups that we work with regularly during a power outage adopts buildings like an OCH building or a retirement home. And they go in, assess the needs of the residents, and then provide the necessary supports. And so that's the kind of sort of client relationship that we envisage. And like I said, on a broader sort of city to OCH front, we maintain a good relationship and regularly strategize on how to better work together during emergencies.
Okay, thank you. So it's possible a third party group, such as a faith-based or other, could be working with OCH buildings. Okay, that's good to know. No, I appreciate that. I do worry about the silent emergencies, and I call it that because I'm talking about power outages where you just don't know how people are doing. It's one thing when a tree falls on someone's house, you know, or there's a flood, it's obvious, but power outages are silent and we don't know what's going on at each house. So I appreciate we need that ability to get to people's doors and have systems where people are checked on. So I don't know how you can do that through a grant, but it's still a concern. I think it's about training at the community level, all communities, but I don't know if there's anything that can be done via the grant on that kind of checking in.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. And it's an excellent one because wellness visits are so important. We do envision the grant helping in this regard because we think that some of these recipient organizations will use the money to do training and exercise and to get their members up to speed on how to deliver proper wellness visits. And I see that Councillor Dudas has stepped out for a moment, but she mentioned the Blackburn Hamlet Community Association. They have already organized themselves in this fashion, including up to naming block captains. And so that's the kind of best practice that we hope other organizations will adopt.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Devine and then King.
Thank you, Chair. You can hear me okay? I don't usually do my meetings remote. Thank you. Hello, staff, colleagues. So having been a community association president myself, when we responded to a tornado in 2018 and a derecho in 2022, I am definitely supportive of this program, but I do have some questions about scope and process. I am keenly aware of the impact that local organizations can have in the face of emergency, but I am also aware of their limitations. Councillor Dudas made reference to supporting getting more community boots on the ground so that the city could continue focusing on the heavy lifting. To that effect, what kind of training initiatives or equipment acquisition initiatives might this program be fulfilling that could otherwise be the city's own responsibility or addressed through a city-led process?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. It's another really important one because we want to make the distinction here in that this grant and the work that these organizations are doing are never meant to replace the work the city is doing, particularly when it comes to emergency services. Some of you have heard me share this story before, but the first night of the derecho, every single fire truck in the city of Ottawa was out on multiple calls. And so the city will be always owning that life safety space, including some of the more dangerous debris management work. Where we see this program filling gaps is really at the neighborhood level. So neighbors helping neighbors to clean up their yards, wellness visits, neighbors, opening or community organizations opening centers for people to go to, things like that complement the city's efforts but don't replace them.
Thank you. I want to echo a question that was raised by Councillor Skalski on encouraging joint applications, which I completely agree with. Whether it's on a training initiative or equipment acquisition, I could envision a scenario where 3 small communities might apply for funding for the same professional to offer the same training. It could be much, much more beneficial and get a whole lot more value for money if those 3 communities were to submit one application. They could also benefit from, networking and building their plan together. In addition to allowing joint applications, will the city be encouraging or incentivizing joint applications? Let's say you get an application from a community, from an organization, and you can measure that the impact will be small. Is there a way that you can proactively steer towards something where there'll be a better impact?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. So, and it's a great point that you raised. So, in addition to encouraging those joint applications, that's certainly something that the team that will be evaluating the different applications will be looking at and assessing those opportunities. And if we are seeing those opportunities, at the end of the day, we're wanting to help support the highest potential impact as we're assessing those grant opportunities. So it's certainly something that the team will be well positioned to do as we are reviewing those different applications.
Thank you. My next questions have to do with measuring impact. And if I am correct, this program is launching in Q2 or Q3 of 2026, correct?
Mr. Chair, if Council does approve the pilot program, we'll be working towards launching in Q3, yes.
Okay, thank you. So again, supportive of the project, but $1 million over 3 years over an entire city, covering such a wide breadth of eligible activities, that is not a large funding envelope to play with. I have worked for a grant funding organization where when we had small envelopes, the way to achieve objectives was to be very, very specific about those objectives and very specific about the assessment process. So I've got a few questions on that. What kind of measures will the city take to ensure that these limited funds go to areas of the city that are most susceptible? For example, has there been any vulnerability mapping so that we can launch this program knowing where the flood risk zones are, or the heat island zones are, or zones prone to more extended outages? Is there any way that the assessment criteria will be tied to areas of already identified gaps and risks?
Chair, to you, that's a great question. The selection panel will be reviewing and trying to balance across projects, project types, organizations, and as well as the geography of Ottawa. So certainly we'll be keeping in mind in those areas of the city that are vulnerable and have demonstrated a pattern of vulnerability.
Thank you. There's always a risk when you try to achieve the objectives by spreading it across all of your categories, across project type, across risk, across geography. There's always a risk that in trying to spread equitably, you don't necessarily meet the most pressing gaps. I've been in that process before. In the report's comments on risk mitigation, it says that one risk is that the program will be oversubscribed, which I can guarantee you're going to run into that, especially with a limited budget. To address that risk, it says the selection panel will review all applications against selection criteria. Preference will be awarded to projects with the greatest impact. So if this program is launching in Q3, are those assessment criteria already complete? And are there clear guidelines for how you will be scoring the grants based on those criteria in order to properly measure greatest impact?
Chair, the criteria that we've established right now, or the guidelines we have for selection, are about the eligibility, the completeness, the alignment of what the program or what the proposal is in terms of how it aligns with the program objectives, and as well as their ability to reach equity deserving disproportionately impacted communities, and as well as then the feasibility and as well as a work plan. So in combination, I think that's what we're going to be looking at, or the selection panel will be looking at. I hope that answers your question.
It does. For example, is there anything in the application process where the applicant has to demonstrate a history of risk that they are looking to address?
We can certainly take that into consideration and for our criteria when we finalize them.
Okay. I might try to have some offline questions about the assessment criteria and the process for measuring them. My last question is about how you're going to assess organizations and their ability to successfully deliver these projects. As I understand, one of the criteria is whether or not they have liability insurance, which is good. But will an organization's mandate or their governance structure or their history of program activity, or, as I said, even their experience in serving residents during emergencies, will any of those play a role in assessment criteria?
We would encourage all applicants to demonstrate all of those things that you have mentioned in their application in order to convey that they are capable and ready to deliver the proposal they're putting forward.
I appreciate that you'll be inviting them to demonstrate that, but if you have an assessment criteria that you're going to be using to measure greatest impact, do you have a scoring rubric whereby you can assign scores to every criteria so that you can arrive at a number that tells you which applicants can measurably, by the application alone, deliver greatest impact?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. So in addition to what Simi had mentioned, next steps, if council does approve the pilot project, that is the next step in the work that the team will be undertaking, is developing that more detailed criteria assessment based on kind of those parameters that we've outlined within the staff report that Simi just walked through.
And Councillor Devine, that is your time. If you have
Thank you.
further questions, you're welcome to go back on the list, but I am going to take the next colleague, and that's Councillor King, followed by Councillor Johnson.
Thank you so much, Chair, and I do want to thank staff for this report, and will definitely support the plan. I'm also pleased that we're having a general discussion about balancing standard operating procedures with an ad hoc community approach. So I do appreciate the comments that Chair Menard made there, because as you might remember, I had made inquiries into even the previous term about how we're going to move ahead with standard operating procedures. And I think that this pilot moves towards that. I'm also pleased that this pilot is occurring in conjunction with the establishment of a comprehensive emergency food security response plan with a focus on equity deserving communities and more rapid response that emerged from one of the directions that I had provided during the last budget cycle. And I think that's very important for us to consider the needs of equity deserving populations based on my experience during the Direco in Overbrook. The program as proposed targets equity deserving populations, but the report acknowledges that fewer community organizations may exist in equity seeking neighborhoods with the capacity to apply. And I know that you've discussed working with Ottawa Community Housing, but I'm also wondering if you will go above and beyond and work with other organizations such as Ottawa Public Health, our community health and resource centers, as well as settlement agencies in order to reach newcomer and racialized communities.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor, for your advocacy. We always say over and over again that the emergency management program at the City of Ottawa exists to help those most in need. We are always expanding and looking to partner with more groups, including those that are serving equity deserving populations. A good example is a meeting we had a couple of months ago with United Way Ottawa. And the reason that we met with them is because they serve a newcomer to Ottawa population, and they understand the needs of that group. And so it was, like I said, there's a good example of a new relationship that we're developing and leveraging, including we'll be sending them our extreme heat brochure for their distribution with their network of social services providers. So we're going to continue to build our network of partners across as many groups as possible, both inside and outside this grant program.
I appreciate that. The survey also found that fewer than 1/3 of respondents have a community emergency plan, yet the program, in a sense, prioritizes applicants who already have one. So how will staff balance this priority while also supporting organizations that are starting from scratch? Will there be a clear pathway for groups with no existing plan?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. We want to make sure that we support both types of groups because the development of community emergency plans are so important. But at the same time, there's confidence that the money will be redistributed within the community when when the grant goes to an organization that has a history of supporting during emergency responses, that already has an emergency plan, and that has the governance and other types of requirements in place. And so, as Sami mentioned before, we're finalizing the criteria, we're taking this feedback, and we'll be making sure that we create an environment where a balance is possible in terms of the distribution of money.
I do appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to that plan. My last set of questions really revolve around the implementation of equipment. I have consistently advocated for installation of transfer switches at field houses and community facilities so that they could serve neighborhood resilience during emergencies. And in New Edinburgh, the local community association successfully worked with the city to install a transfer switch at the field house as a pilot using community dollars. However, the process required significant coordination around electrical upgrades, approvals, and ensuring a generator would be available during an extreme weather event. Given that this program would fund transfer switches and generators for community organizations, have staff identified lessons learned from the New Edinburgh Fieldhouse experience? And what processes are being put in place to ensure future transfer switch installations can be implemented efficiently, and that organizations have clarity regarding generator access and deployment during an emergency?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I think that, and in partnership with our colleagues in RCFS, we definitely have a lot of experience assessing which locations would be prime targets for transfer switches and doing the installation where it makes sense. I want to caution, though, against the concept that emergency center reception centers are the be on and end all. And this kind of comes back to Councillor Kavanaugh's question about wellness visits. What we find is that as a first step, most people during an emergency, during a power outage, want to shelter in place, want to stay home. And so we're always trying to balance those two needs. And I think that's what you'll see in the distribution of grants, is that they'll be supporting some projects, including transfer switches, mobile generators, and supporting others that focus more on the boots on the ground wellness visits.
I appreciate that. I know during the Dureco in Overbrook, the community center was utilized as a hub. We had to obviously work together to ensure that the ad hoc network worked, but there was outreach, but of course it was coordinated from a specific location. So that's why I think it is important for us to ensure that, both are working hand in hand. Indeed, during the Dureco, communities such as Overbrook experienced prolonged power outages and a lack of readily available local supports, leaving residents to rely heavily on neighbors and my office and informal community networks. How will staff ensure that communities facing those kinds of challenges have the capacity to access this program and build the community preparedness networks needed before the next major weather event?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So there are a wide range of community associations serving different types of neighborhoods in Ottawa, including equity deserving areas of the city that we hope and will encourage to apply. But we also know that there are faith-based groups and social services providers that serve broader regions of our city and that we believe, based on past performance, will continue to show up, will deploy beyond their immediate neighborhood, and are looking for those most in need to support.
And we appreciate their efforts because we've seen them, unfortunately, broadly applied with the emergence of so many emergencies that are besetting the city. But we also want to commend. I want to commend you for bringing this program forward. This is exactly the kind of program that we should be doing. It's practical, community-grounded, equity-conscious, and evidence-based. And I think, unfortunately, with the number of natural emergencies, disasters that we're seeing, we will need to ensure that we can leverage volunteers, in-kind contributions, and community capacity. And I think that this program and this pilot really works towards that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Johnson and then Luloff.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for this report. It's really exciting to see the progress that the city has made on several emergency preparedness fronts, including, the notification system, which was a big deal for residents. And now this, I think that, when I was door knocking in 2022, it was during the derecho, and seeing the investment and the attention paid to community experiences during those emergencies puts us in good stead. Just a couple questions quickly. So councillor involvement, I think that's actually a very interesting question. I think there is, undoubtedly probably an unevenness or a difference in our approaches, given that each of our offices are independent from one another. I would like to see a stronger relationship between community groups and the City of Ottawa, in the same way that Hydro Ottawa now also, tries to communicate directly with residents in these moments instead of going through a councillor communication channel, which, we still share it, but we're less of an expected intermediary, which of course creates vulnerabilities. So can you help me to understand whether this program is intended sort of in that same way to strengthen those relationships between the corporation and community groups directly? Or is there still a role to play that you think is unique to councillors that we should all understand?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I'll answer it in two parts. So yes, we do believe this grant will help strengthen relationships between these community organizations in the city, and we want more of that. We're actually reorganizing our internal processes to better accommodate liaison during emergency situations. So when we activate the Emergency Coordination Center going forward, there will always be a community liaison rep from the city who is able to directly engage with community associations and other groups. We did this during the spring freshet, but only 3 areas of the city were impacted. So there was only 3 community associations we were doing it. What we're trying to do is scale up so that we can do it citywide. To address your other question about councillors' role, we've really appreciated the relationship with councillors during emergencies, and there are a couple of core functions that we'd like you to continue doing. Number 1, amplifying the city's messaging, guidance, advice. Number 2, continuing to feed us intelligence. You know your wards the best, and we've really benefited from your direction in terms of which neighborhoods may need the most assistance. And also being a great connector to the community associations and groups with whom you have relationships. So going forward, it's a different role between what the city does and what councillors do, but it's a direct relationship that is really important.
I appreciate that distinction. College Ward has had various relationships with their city councillors over the years, and we want to make sure that they have the best understanding of where they can find the best information. So following up on a couple questions, so, the storage issue. So my understanding was in city facilities that there was a cost recovery for when community groups used storage space, that there's an expectation that there's a rental fee associated with that. Otherwise, community groups do not get to store things for free. So when you're talking about a new model, is the understanding from Parks and Rec that will be adapted given the context? Because I do anticipate a conflict.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. So that's certainly something, Councillor, that we'll take offline for further conversations, but we would work in alignment with existing policies and approaches.
Okay. I'll be interested to know what that means, because I do think that there's a financial risk to another department and an unevenness in maybe some of the other groups who have tried to use storage in city facilities for a variety of reasons that have been told no at this point. I know that there's a difference, between emergency preparedness and sports, but I think it will be something we'll have to look at. And to follow up on some of my councillor colleagues describing the idea of joint applications, in other granting scenarios, you can sometimes get bonus points if you apply with another group. So maybe that's something that you can do to encourage folks to look across their communities and think about who they might offer or extend a branch to. That would be probably maybe a more, teach the person to fish kind of approach, and puts less pressure on you, give them additional scoring opportunities for that kind of relationship building. There, I believe, is a list of buildings that don't have backup generators, is there not, with fire services? I'm looking at my other council colleagues. I believe we did that 3 years ago. So will we be using that list for our outreach for communities that obviously have a deficit when it comes to backup power? I think that would be a really good resource for us here.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Absolutely. We use that list all the time, including when we organize our own wellness visits for extreme weather events.
Okay, right on. Yeah, definitely. I have some vulnerabilities in my ward that I'd like to know that have a direct relationship with you. So that's always good. When it comes to the 50,000, the actual allotment, is the idea that the community group is awarded that in 1 year, or do they have to spend it within 1 year?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. The grant, whatever is submit or given awarded to the association or the applicant, will be given at once. Once they've been approved, and as well as once they've satisfied the requirements and signed the agreement. But they have 1 year to complete the project.
Okay, so it is that they have to spend it within a year.
Correct.
Okay, and if there is an emergency at the time that they have, a relationship with you, is there a possibility of pivot if they find that there's something that they could use that they didn't apply for?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it's a great point and something that we'll take away and consider allowing that flexibility. And the other thing that I'll add, Councillor, with respect to the grants, while the conditions are in and around a year, or sorry, not in and around, but to spend those funds within a year, similar to other grant programs that we administer. Of course, if there are extenuating circumstances, we will contemplate extensions on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, very good. Thank you for this fabulous report. Looking forward.
Thank you, Councillor, for those comments. Councillor Lulov, and then Chair Menard.
Thanks, Chair. I really appreciate that we're having this discussion today because many of us in our communities have been having versions of this conversation since the ice storm in 1998. The question of how neighborhoods can better prepare for and support one another during major emergencies is not a new one, but it's becoming increasingly important. Because over the past several decades, communities across our city have experienced ice storms, flooding, tornadoes, prolonged power outages, severe winter weather, and more recently, the mesoscale convective system that caused widespread damage across our city. And since we can't seem to agree on how to pronounce derecho, I'm happy to use that technically accurate alternative. The reality is that regardless of what we call these events, their impacts on residents have been significant and long-lasting. We still have forest cleanup happening across the city, even years later. These experiences have demonstrated that emergency preparedness cannot exist solely at the citywide level. It needs to exist at the community level with local organization, volunteers, and neighborhood networks equipped with the supplies they need to support residents when normal services are strained. So I very much support the intent of this pilot program, and I really appreciate the work that staff have put into it. My focus today is on ensuring that it is accessible to the organizations that may be best positioned to help their communities, including smaller community associations, rural groups, faith organizations, condominium communities, and other volunteer-led organizations that may not have significant administrative capacity. So my questions are, many of the organizations that know their communities best are run entirely by volunteers and do not have dedicated staff, grant writers, or administrative support. How will we ensure that the application process is accessible and that smaller organizations are not unintentionally disadvantaged compared to larger, more established applicants?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair, and I can start off. My colleagues can join in if they want to add more. I mean, I think that through these discussions, what's been highlighted to me is a couple things, including the need for very clear application instructions, which we will make sure we absolutely post. We can also encourage some of these smaller groups, as has been mentioned by others, to apply together to expand their reach and to potentially reduce the burden of the application. We're happy to, in the lead up to when this is posted, make additional resources available, including, town hall sessions where we provide Q&A about the grant and help people understand it better.
Do you mind walking us through the eligibility criteria in practical terms and explain whether there are any types of organizations that may provide important community support during emergencies but could find themselves excluded from the program? I think you've already mentioned OCH.
Chair, for the question, I think is the question: are we potentially excluding someone given our eligibility criteria?
Can you walk us? Can you walk us through the eligibility criteria in practical terms and explain whether there are types of organizations that may provide important community support during emergencies but could find themselves excluded from the program?
So the criteria is about groups that have some level of governance and as well as administrative capabilities, that they have a decision-making body, that they follow nonprofit principles, and that they offer services to the City of Ottawa or City of Ottawa residents. And that the last one is that it's organizations that are less than $1 million annual budget. So your question is does it potentially exclude some groups that could be helpful? I think the city already works with some of the larger organizations. And what this program is, as you had pointed to, is to reach those smaller and medium-sized organizations. And while they might not have the capabilities right now or to write, I think part of what this program is to build capacity and over the years. And so I think once we've learned lessons and perhaps there's some successful applicants and some leaders of community associations or other community groups, we can do some social learning and sharing successes.
That's fair. Communities across Ottawa face different challenges depending on their geography and circumstances. Rural communities, for example, may experience longer response times and greater dependence on local volunteers, as we've seen, while other communities may face very different vulnerabilities. How will staff ensure that those differing realities are reflected in the evaluation process?
Mr. Chair, I'll start with answering that question, then I'll ask my colleagues if there's anything to add in. I think just first noting that the way we've intentionally designed the grant program to be relatively flexible, to recognizing the fact that, as you mentioned, every single community is unique in terms of their level of preparedness. So we're wanting to make sure that we're maintaining that flexibility, and that will certainly be something that we're considering as we're evaluating those different the applications. I'm just looking to my colleagues to see if there's anything else that they'd like to answer there.
I would just add that the rural residents have been identified as a group within our equity policies, and as well as disproportionate impacted populations in Climate Ready Ottawa. So we will have targeted outreach to those groups.
Okay, I think that it's important to realize that a disaster is a disaster, whether it happens in the suburbs, downtown, or in a rural community. And so the lens should be the disaster, frankly. Although the needs will be different and the supports will be different, I don't think that we should be limiting the scope of what we offer based on anything but the specific need of that community. This program contemplates funding equipment such as generators, radios, emergency supplies. What do we see as the biggest implementation challenge around? We've discussed insurance, storage, maintenance, training, and ensuring that equipment remains available and serviceable to the community over the long term.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. It's a really good one, and I think that in some respects we're going to learn as we go. What I will say, based on my interactions with these groups, is one of their biggest internal challenges is something that we've discussed earlier, is making sure they maintain an appropriate roster of volunteers and that they mainstream emergency management into their meetings, into their activities, into the work that they're doing, because it's a people-first approach.
When staff report back at the end of the 3-year pilot, what specific outcomes are you looking for to determine whether the program has improved community preparedness and resilience rather than simply distributing funding and equipment?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So we will be looking at some of the measurable outputs, such as the number of community emergency plans that were developed, the numbers of training sessions and exercises that were held. But we'll also be, and what we discussed earlier is observing through our engagement with these groups, their ability to show up when we need them to engage with us, and to demonstrate that they're in the community on a regular basis.
I suppose the intent is to ensure that we free up city resources to be able to respond as well. So, I mean, you spoke about the derecho and how every single fire unit was in use. I can imagine that what you're looking to ensure is that those resources are freed up while empowering communities to do some of that work themselves. Correct?
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, the city will always focus on critical emergency response, but for non-life safety calls, including help with getting debris off of someone's driveway, we hope that these neighborhood groups can support some of these tasks, thereby freeing up city resources to focus on the more challenging or life safety calls.
Thank you, Beth, and good work to staff on this. Looking forward to seeing how this rolls out.
Thank you, Councillor. Chair Menard and then Conseiller Plante.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks so much to staff for the report. I'll try to be quick with my questions. I'm going to focus in on the cafe's recommendations that they made to committee. The first is around the collaboration with community associations. And I wanted to zero in on the report said staff will provide complementary support to applicants through the Office of Emergency Management. Just wondering more what you mean by that. Do you mean on the actual application process, or do you mean extra support in terms of like training, ready use tools, that sort of thing, outside of the application process?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a bit of a combination of both. We want to make sure that people understand the application process, and so we'll be providing supports in that regard. And then we will be supporting groups through advice and guidance in terms of the development of their community emergency management plans.
Okay, that's good to hear that. That's the second part in particular. Just there's so many questions here today. I think there's so much interest in this because of what we've all been through in the city of Ottawa, and we know this is coming again. Climate change is affecting our daily lives, and so we need to adapt to what are inevitable issues that will come our way. And obviously, it's more than just a $1 million grant program. There's obviously huge interest in response, and obviously your response goes much further than just the grant program. The training sessions for community members, I think right now a lot of people are not prepared in Ottawa, whether it's food or battery backup, the heat component. So just outside of the grant, can people just work with you? Are there resources in that way that people can work with you for regular events or sessions that people, I know this has been held already and people have been doing this already, but how do we proliferate that, I suppose, all across the city?
Thank you for the great question, Mr. Chair. So we are always available to engage with communities, community groups in terms of our Are You Ready program. We encourage preparedness at both the individual and community level, and we have resources on ottawa.ca under emergency preparedness, including checklists and other guides to help people get prepared. We've had this discussion in other committee meetings, and I want to highlight here that we're always happy to meet people where they're at. We know that having a 72-hour kit can be a difficult thing for people who are struggling to get by every day, especially under the cost of living. But we encourage even the most basic preparedness, which is knowing who to call to receive help, including in some cases city resources. And so we have a range of supports available, and we're always happy to show up at any kind of community engagement session.
Okay, that's great to hear. The cafe's point around a community access for equipment storage, emergency use, the community organization preparedness, in addition to those sort of city-owned community center preparedness, is, I think, an important point. And I'm hopeful that we take that point that the cafes has made as part of the program rollout. The second point is around the adjustments. So it's a three-year pilot. With a review, I guess I'll just ask you if you'll take direction to simply report back in a year's time after the launch of the pilot project to these two committees as part of a memo, just the uptake of it, if there are any little tweaks you're seeing, if we're fully subscribed or not. It'd be helpful if you could report back in a year. The cafes recommends just to see if there are some adjustments potentially needed within that year. I hope you can take that direction.
Mr. Chair, we can take that direction.
Thank you very, very much. That's appreciated. And then just last one on the Hydro One, Hydro Ottawa collaboration. I just wonder your thoughts on that recommendation from cafes. Just that interface with the two for applicants, the accommodation of rural realities in the grant call and the published definitions of the professional training requirement are all things that they mentioned in that third point. Just a staff response on those recommendations.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. To be candid, I'm not entirely sure I fully understood the recommendation. Both Hydro Ottawa and Hydro One are excellent emergency partners, emergency management partners for us, and they have also learned a lot through multiple power outages. In addition to the city having an Are You Ready, preparedness program, they both have their own as well and do a lot of community engagement. So I'd be happy to unpack the recommendation a bit more, but right now we view them as part of our immediate ecosystem and a direct partner during power outages.
Okay, and then on the rural realities piece in the grant call, just different. Some of our colleagues have spoken to this too, and then the clearly published definitions for this quote unquote professional training requirement. I think the point here is that there are potential people that are experienced in this, and they're not necessarily. I don't know what kind of accreditation you would need to be quote unquote professional, but I think the point is just that we want as many people as we can working in conjunction on this in a good way with good information. So just maybe more information on that would be helpful.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. We thought that was excellent feedback, and we're very happy to tighten our language, provide a bit more of a definition, and make it more useful for applicants. Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, thank you so much for this. It's excellent to see, and obviously the interest and amount of questions here goes far beyond this program, and I'm excited to see what we can do to make sure we're prepared in the future. Thank you so much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Plante, and then Hill.
Merci beaucoup. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of piggyback on something you guys said, and then Councillor King sort of addressed it as well in his comments. And you were talking about equity-seeking communities and giving them more capacity to deal with these issues. I do want to sort of temper those expectations a little bit, because we deal with 1,000 mini emergencies a day in Ward 12. Just a couple weeks ago, there was a lockdown at the University of Ottawa because of a suspected shooter. The school routes have been deemed these hazardous zones by the school board, so kids can now be bused literally 100 meters to school because it's not safe for them to walk. So the average income in Lower Town is $32,000 a year per family. So asking those people to sort of take on more capacity when they're already working multiple jobs, they're already low income, they're already dealing with a lot is I think, you're going to have to be, I suspect the solution will be to sort of be prepared in those communities already, not asking them to take on more when something does strike, because they already deal with multiple challenges, both personal and environmental, every single day. And I do want to give a shout out to cafes too, because we did have a discussion with them about our, and in Virus Center as well, about our sponge park that we're putting up in Vanier, because we deal with things like electrical outages, which when you deal with shift work, for example, something like that can be really, really devastating. So these kinds of collaborations, I think, will be helpful in the future. And I would, I'm happy to chat with you guys about it. I would just be really, really mindful of what you're asking low-income communities to do and to take on, because they already deal with multiple challenges every single day. And it is quite overwhelming for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Vice Chair Hill.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for the report, staff. I recall, I think it was a couple of years ago, that I had a meeting with cafes, and they presented me with a report talking about resilience in the community and the importance of that topic. I appreciated that, and I think that's probably a hefty part of where this came from, and certainly from the motion that we saw a couple of years ago talking about the importance of community weather resilience issues. I think the preamble to this out in West Carleton in the spring, right, with Team Rubicon and the $60,000 mass sandbag machine that was getting tested out there. And I think that's exactly what we want to be spending this kind of money on, is the types of equipment that will help our local community groups be resilient. And I think that was a textbook example. I am a little concerned with some of the debate this morning, because I'm starting to think that this might be turning into a bit of open funding for organizations to get investments in the community, as opposed to established mandated organizations with known governance structures, vision statements that talk about crisis operations, emergency response, the Respond Ottawa, the Team Rubicon, those types of organizations who day in, day out have a volunteer board that look at the governance of crisis response. And they have the knowledge base and the experience base and the operational knowledge in order to look at what the community writ large, Ottawa, needs in order to be able to do good in that community, Ottawa. I would share the comments I think made by Councillor Luloff about, the group that needs the support here is the group affected by the crisis. That's the group we should be focusing squarely on. And I just want to make sure that we're not starting to go down the road of opening up a fund that, perhaps could start turning into peripheral funding expenditures as opposed to core investments like what we saw with a $60,000 sandbag machine, which clearly has a emergency response component to it. I just want to make sure that that funding is safeguarded. So the money that we're spending is actually going to core crisis operations, emergency response investments.
Thank you for the question and comments, Mr. Chair. So I think that this links very nicely with Councillor Menard's recent request for us to report back on a yearly basis. It will give us an opportunity to share with you where the grant funding has been distributed, to which types of organization, what types of projects, and it sort of provides an additional check and balance against the valid points that you raised.
I share the interest in the eligibility criteria and the jury process. I would like to get an update on that, perhaps offline, if possible. Are we going to be looking to establish some type of formal MOU or expectation contract with successful grant applicants in terms of the expected outcomes and management of the process?
Mr. Chair, thanks for the question. We certainly will be working with legal, and we will have contribution agreements that all applicants will sign. That will also include some requirements that they have to demonstrate, as well as deliverables and budgeting.
Okay, thank you for that. I would be interested to look at that process as well offline. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councillor Tierney.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm clearly not driving. I'm a passenger. Just to get that out of the way. Oddly enough, I'm going to a Green Municipal Fund announcement at the same time. To staff, obviously, we see the Green Municipal Fund as some accessible federal funds. Obviously, it probably doesn't apply in this situation. I will continue to advocate for it. With this, I think I like the approach. I think it's good. We have to think of a lot of the groups similar to what we do with the our outdoor rink operators that also receive funding to do the job that frankly as a city we can't do because it would overburden a lot of the stuff that we take care of. But to some of the other council colleagues' points, we will have a rigorous process, obviously, to ensure that they are actually who they are, and will there be regular audits to ensure the money is being granted out to the appropriate people?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. So in addition to what Sami had confirmed, certainly we can confirm that, Councillor, that our evaluation and how we're setting up the criteria will align with the grants and contribution policy.
Great, thank you. And one thing I always like to continue to bring up, and I think one of the other councillors had raised it, we all operate very differently from a communications shop perspective. We have 24 different communication shops in the city. I think I make no bones about it. We're very aggressive in ours. I've created my own texting feature for emergency situations, snow plowing and everything else. I see the city is getting up in the game. My one concern I continue to raise is we have access to so many email addresses because of the vacant unit tax database. And I asked this question before about emergency services, since this has all kind of turned into this larger discussion. Have we been coordinating? How far along are we to being able to use those email addresses? Because last discussion we had is we weren't allowed to use those email addresses for anything except for the vacant unit tax at the time, and we were looking to modify that. I just want to make sure if we're doing things through a couple of emergency funds and all these great things, that we're actually coordinating and going to make a real effort and change. Is this something on the radar?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. It sounds like you're asking if we can augment some of the city's communications with emergency management guidance. I'm not aware of those discussions related to piggybacking on the comms for vacant property taxes, properties, pardon. But what we are encouraging is for people to subscribe to our public emergency notification system, Ottawa Alert, as a good first step. And they can find that on ottawa.ca.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And what is the number of people that have registered there now? I bet you it's a pittance compared to the over 200 and 300,000 email addresses we've collected for the vacant unit tax. And that's my point is, I keep raising this. We have access to all these email addresses, but for the emergency one, how many people have registered to date now?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. So you're right. It's not comparable to the amount of email addresses we have access to. I think it's about 10,000, which I know seems low, but we're on par with subscriptions in other cities, including Vancouver.
Yeah, and again, this is where I think we really have to, if we put people through the pain of an annual check-in on their vacant unit tax, with updated email addresses on a regular basis. I keep raising this. We need legal to focus on this to get a descriptor out there. If there has to be a box for them to check to be able to allow them to join this list. 10,000 should, in my mind, should be at least 50,000 or greater, knowing we're at 300,000 email addresses for the vacant unit tax. So just something to think about. And I hope, I'll continue to press on that because I think it is important.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. I was going to offer some thoughts, but Councillor Kelly?
Back on the board. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry to do that. I just feel compelled to address this. Something I've been hearing a lot throughout this meeting is just the importance of community associations. And I'm after experiencing several emergency responses in my ward, I am acutely aware of how important the community centers are in terms of coordinating responses, having areas where people can come and pick things up and get information. I am a little bit concerned though on their ability to and willingness, quite frankly, to be the organization applying for these grants and administering these programs. I will point once again to West Carleton Disaster Relief, and I think this goes back to what Councillor Hill was addressing in his remarks, is just ensuring that the organizations that we're offering this to have the capacity and governance structure to do this. When I look around in my ward, so one challenge would be if community associations were to be the vehicle for this, and I can't speak on behalf of other wards, but I assume it's the same in other rural wards, is that I have 5 or 6 community associations in my ward across a very large area. And so if one community association was to apply and get a grant, then my assumption would that their focus would be on their catchment area, and that would be it. And so I'm not sure that model would be equitable or work in rural areas. But one thing that I wanted to highlight is that West Carleton Disaster Relief has many people on its board that are also involved in community associations. So there's the overarching body that kind of takes care of the whole ward and work with the community associations themselves. But again, not sure our community associations have the capacity or desire to take this on, nor do I think they would be the best group situated to do that, but certainly need to be involved in the conversation, and just felt compelled to make those comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. That's appreciated. Just thought I'd offer my own thoughts, if I may. I'm certainly going to support this, but I don't think the public or even city staff fully appreciate the breadth of subject matter issues councillors deal with. And I don't mean around the committee or council table, I mean in our neighborhoods. We try and mitigate people with severe mental health challenges who are walking around the communities, causing challenges. The community looks to us to solve those issues. I get calls at 4:10 on a Friday afternoon from people who say, I'm being evicted tomorrow, help me. We're the only stand left within the city before they're evicted to help them. Or people who lack very basic necessities come to us. We are asked to mitigate heated disputes between community association members or community members. We have the worst neighbor disputes in River Ward per Ottawa bylaw that were asked to, not asked by bylaw, but asked to be intervened by community members. And I've sat in people's living rooms who have lost family members due to homicide or very regrettable accidents. And we're the only ones from the city who show up. And it goes to, I'm not trained for this. We lack training as members of council on how to deal with the most significant, challenging cases, whether it's disaster relief or some of the other examples I've listed. So when the tornado literally spared me in 2018, went over the building I was in, saw it coming, went over the community center, hits the Quarry Co-op, absolute disaster. It had hit West Carleton, it had hit Arlington, Trent Arlington first, then Hunt Club. Get on the phone with the city manager, had no idea that Hunt Club had been hit. He's like, all our resources are in West Carleton right now. I became the de facto traffic controller that night. There were people whose homes were decimated. We had to arrange housing. We had to arrange busing to get people to the Canterbury Community Center to stay the night. And that was my weekend, trying to coordinate what does my community need, what resources are available, who do I need to speak to? And then the derecho comes, and that's the next level, because now it was significantly more people in multiple wards, but without power, damage to power lines down Hunt Club Road that for days were untouched, trees everywhere, people who did not have the tools needed to address their property issues, homes without roofs, literally for years because of insurance challenges. And that I had more support for. But in the early hours and early days, the community looked to the local councillor to try and direct the needs, align those with what the city could offer. Again, without training, you just do with what you think is the right thing to do. And you listen to what your community needs and you try and act. But we absolutely need better coordination. We absolutely need to be able to take stock of what assets are available in communities and who is available to step up and help. To the point about checking in on the most vulnerable people, that's an excellent point. It was COVID that underscored that for me in my office, where we had taken upon ourselves to contact who we thought were the most vulnerable just to check in with them. And then other services, city services, were checking in the most vulnerable. When I've got 2,500, 3,000 people who live in Ottawa community housing, if our family houses, which are the true hubs of these communities, are without power and the employees themselves are trying to deal with their own challenges at home and unable to get to family houses, then we have some significant problems. People who can't address some of their most basic needs, what happens? So I fully support being prepared. This is truly about being prepared, looking at how are you able to take care of yourself within the first 72 hours, but how do we as a community get better prepared and organized and trained to help each other. So we have a lot of people in the city that want to help out. One, we have challenges coordinating all that goodwill. And secondly, we need to take stock of who has what that is able to help out. So I feel very strongly about this. I think that, you know, a new term of council is coming, and not just for new members of council, but for all members of council. Think about some training that can be provided, that when we're in these situations, what is our true role? How can we refine that better? And, you know, I know we as a city plan for, I think, 30 critical events. The two that keep me up most at night are when we have ice storms. We know that Eastern Ontario is going to get hit with more ice storms. That is absolutely predicted. But the big ice storm that comes, and then we have minus 30 for 2 weeks, and pipes break and people have no power. That's what keeps me up at night. And the other one is severe summer weather. We know tornadoes are going to get worse. We know power outages are going to continue in frequency. I'm not saying all the other emergencies aren't important, but these are the biggies that are most probable to happen. So how do we prepare our residents for those types of events? So I strongly support this. It's a pilot. It's not going to be perfect. We're going to refine it. We're going to get updates every year. We're going to reflect on worked well. We're going to make it better. Assuming it works, we're going to put more funds in, assuming $1 million is not enough, but we have to start from somewhere. So I certainly appreciate the comments and questions today, and the fact that we had 13 speakers demonstrates the interest and support, ultimate support that we'll have for this. So, Councillor Menard had a direction. If you just want to formally read it onto the record, Chair, that would be great.
Thank you very, very much. Sorry about that. Direct staff to report back to the two committees following the 1-year pilot project to see if adjustments are needed. Thank you, Chair.
That's okay with staff?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. Okay. Does anyone need the staff recommendation read? Is everyone aware of the recommendation? Okay, is that recommendation carried?
Carried.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks again to staff. That was the substantive item that we were to deal with. So just before we adjourn, we have another standing committee meeting that follows. And if you could just give us an update, Chair Menard.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So we'll meet immediately after this meeting in 15 minutes. So we'll reconvene at 11:40 a.m. for the Environment and Climate Change Committee meeting in this room. We're staying in this room.
Thank you, Chair. The joint committee now stands adjourned. Thank you.